For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Wyatt Cavalier. I, along with Stefan, run Altea. We're talking to David Spickett today, who is one of the crew over at the Car Crowd, who we're working with to put together Auto1, which is, I think, probably the most exciting deal that we've done in quite a while. Certainly since Film 1, which was more than 6 months ago. So, David, would you mind introducing yourself and the Car Crowd and just talking a little bit about what you guys do?
Yeah, so David Spickett, CEO here at the Car Crowd, founded in 2019, where I think billed as Europe's largest asset manager dedicated to collectible cars. We have over 115 assets here under management. We've been generating returns for investors on a buy-hold strategy mainly, that's been going for the last 4 and a bit years. We've completed 40 projects with the largest returns being 38% in a single year. And average portfolio performance at the moment runs around 15.8%. We've also offer a fractional business as well, so we allow people to join together to own assets, as well as a private office that we've just launched fairly recently as well, which now looks at catering for family offices and larger institutional investors who want to deploy capital into what we believe is one of the best sort of kept secrets in investing, as not many people have the space to store all these cars, you know, the knowledge to source them, and obviously the capital to deploy to be able to buy them. So we allow people to do that by sort of lowering those water levels and making it, we call it unlocking for more investors around the globe, which is a slightly deliberate pun. But yeah, really excited to meet you all and hopefully, you know, get Auto1 up and running and yeah, become the people responsible for sourcing and managing all of the cars.
How is what we're doing together now different to what you guys usually do?
So normally we would effectively identify a single asset, and then we would look to raise the capital for a single asset, and then we do a hold strategy, normally between 3 and 5 years, looking at capital appreciation across those years. Sometimes we use things like the US arbitrage as a trigger to be the exit. So for the Porsche GT3 RSs that we've got 2 of now in the unit, that's exactly the strategy for those: buying 2025, hold for 3 years, sell in 2028. But obviously this strategy is really exciting and interesting for us. We've often seen and used our data to realize that there's quite significant differences for short periods of time between US and UK markets. We have some quite cool tools that kind of scrape the market and look at for sale cars in the US and the UK and give us a bit of an alert when there's a difference. And things like 993 RSs at the moment, 512Ms, you know, there's significant arbitrage to be had across those, and this gives us the opportunity to get some capital to be able to purchase those assets. Obviously, look to ship them to the US and sell them on demand, and then redeploy the capital hopefully twice a year, if not more. Which is different strategy, but one we're very confident and very excited about.
Yeah, so to rephrase it slightly into more layperson's terms, what we're aiming to do is take advantage of the rule in the US, and correct me if I get any of these bits wrong, David, you're
sure.
Way more technically proficient than I am. Take advantage of the rule in the US where once a vehicle reaches 25 years of age, all the typical emissions, federalization, and other sort of like localization costs and rules go away, right? So instead of it costing $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to make a vehicle road ready in the US, you're just paying the 2.5% customs fee plus whatever it costs to ship. So in the case where there are a number of vehicles that were either never introduced in the US or people just prefer them left-hand drive, and there tends to be a 20, 30, 40% price difference between what's in the US versus what's in the UK. And if it was a 20-year-old car, that wouldn't really help because of all the localization fees. But once you hit that 25 years, which is 2000 and before, there begins to become arbitrage opportunities. And you can see that with your buy and hold technique, where you'll buy a vehicle that's a 2001, 2002, that you anticipate there being significant demand for. But our strategy is acquiring vehicles that are 2000, 99, 98, or as far back as we like, identifying vehicles for sale in the UK, identifying a legitimate, real, identifiable market in the US, ideally a buyer, and then acquire the vehicle in the UK, preferably for slightly below retail because of all the connections you guys have got and your in-depth knowledge of the market. Get it ready to ship to the US, ship it to the US, import it, do all the paperwork, get it from the port to where it needs to go, do all the detailing, do all the photos, all the rest of it, and then sell it. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the ideal, like you say, is we will sell to order is the aim. So as we're acquiring the vehicle, our contact in the US will be already looking to sell, and actually we may even hopefully get to a point where we'll be doing it literally, we will be sourcing the cars to order, so there'll already be a buyer at a price and we'll know the immediate arbitrage. That will hope to speed up the cycle. So yeah, that as you described, it was correct. I think the only thing to say is there's certain makes and models that are quite hard to source. That's like the GT3, sorry, like the 993 RS cars. You know, they're very specialist, so they can require some quite specialist knowledge and inspection. So often there's kind of a worry or a concern for people, so they haven't been imported in massive numbers in the US, so there's still quite a significant arbitrage because of the fact there's only a very small number in terms of the supply in the US, so the demand is still quite high, therefore the volumes is a lot higher. They're actually easier for us to get hold of here in the UK and Europe. And likewise with left-hand drive cars in the UK, it's the wrong-hand drive car in a right-hand drive market. So there's definitely going to be, or there has been, we've seen significant amounts of opportunity to acquire left-hand drive cars where previously we passed them up because they don't fit our thesis. This actually unlocks that opportunity for us to now go, yeah, actually we'll come back and have as many left-hand drive cars as you can give us.
Right, and so we've sort of like thrown out 6 months as the standard amount of time it would take to go from acquire the vehicle to cash back in the pocket. What determines that time frame? Like, what's the quickest it can be versus if things don't go quite to plan, how long can it take? What's the variance band on that?
Yeah, I mean, we do things with rigor. I think that's the first thing to say. So we're not going to be able to do things in days. You know, we will make sure that everything is sourced with a very, very good inspection. We normally would be scouring the market and looking for kind of between 6 to 10 of the asset, you know, to do you know, find the best one. We will make sure that obviously from a pipeline perspective that we understand what cars we're looking at in each phase, so that there's not kind of a delay with the data side of things. It's more just the acquisition of the car. I'd say the quickest we could get from acquisition point in terms of deciding on the car that we wanted, viewing them, you know, vetting the relevant ones and then going to purchase would be probably 2 to 3 weeks. Shipping tends to be anywhere up to about 4 to 6. And then obviously, ideally, we've sold the car already in the US, so there's not a big delay. So I think the fastest cycle would be 2.5 months. We've given ourselves 6 months in the first cycle, especially because we wanted to make sure we can deliver to that time frame and we're not over promising, under delivering. You know, we'd always rather exceed expectations and over deliver, because that's, I think, you know, where everybody wins, and then we can look to deploy more capital. But I would say, yeah, somewhere between kind of 10 to 12 weeks would be a decent aim and aspiration for completing the first cycle.
Okay, that's so that's far quicker than we showed in the memo, and
yeah,
would imply, you know, obviously higher IRRs than what we've talked about. But again, it's all about sort of under promising, over delivering, I guess. Isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we're very conscious that you know, we need to make sure that there's things that move quite a lot in this market, and you know, we have taken some cars that we've seen that just aren't, you know, up to our standards, and we won't do that. You know, we need to make sure, especially with the US market, that really will demand, or the highest prices, sorry, are achieved by getting the lowest mileage, best examples. They can just take that little bit longer to source. So we want to make sure we've got time on the buy side, because there's sort of a classic saying, which is you make your money when you buy. On the way in. So, you know, if we need to be getting the right prices for the right assets and not just kind of going out there fire sale wise and just going, we need a Porsche, let's buy a Porsche. It needs to be considered, and you know, that's what we'll bring to that in terms of, you know, all the assets we've got under management, and the fact that we've been doing this for 5 years. We've got a good network, but it's still I think, you know, could take up to 2, maybe even 3 months to source the right asset at some points. But I'm hopeful that we can overachieve, like you say.
Yeah, as long as it's a pipeline basis, it's kind of fine, right? So we're talking about capital rotations in and out.
Yeah.
Money comes back in the account, money can go back in the account, back out of the account pretty quickly, as long as the pipeline's in place. It's not going to go 7.
100%, yeah. And like I say, the data analyst side of this, you know, so we've got a full-time data analyst who works. I sort of briefly touched on our new approach. So we're developing a set of tools, flags that will work based on this arbitrage business. So It will scale with things like Hemmings.com and all of the different approved dealer sites in the US, plus the Pont Registry, and some other big ones. We'll have Piston Heads, Auto Trader, Car and Classic, Car and Value in the UK, Classic.com as well as another site. So across those sites, we're putting in scraping technology to be able to alert us when there's a new asset listed in the target range. We also then have key KPIs on like how long the asset's been listed for, any variance in price point, and then the number of assets. So these create really good leading indicators for us to know what the market's doing and where there might be arbitrage opportunity. If we start to see the number of assets go down and the values go up, that's obviously a really good indicator that there's low supply and high demand. And that, those sorts of things is what we'll be looking at to try and fill that pipeline, as you were saying, White. So that's what we use to inform the data so that we can have all of that sort of analysis fed up to our investment panel, and our investment panel will then make a decision as to say, right, this is the next asset that we need to go for. And then depending on the availability of the capital where we are in the cycle, obviously we then look to go out and secure the next car.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned you've got 600 different data points that you guys screen. Is that right? What are some of the most important ones that you look at?
I mean, yeah, so for us, we've developed our algorithm over time. I mean, we have thousands, tens of thousands, even not hundreds of thousands of data points in terms of makes and models. You can imagine if you just look at Porsche, you're looking at, a 996 Carrera, a 996 Carrera 2, a 996 Carrera 4, a Carrera 6 Carrera 4S, 996 GT2, GT3, GT3 RSs. So in each one of those, you've got, loads of different data points just to look at the Porsche 996. For each then model and make and model, sorry, you've then got things like left-hand drive, right-hand drive. Mileage is very key, massively key, especially when we've looked at the sensitivity analysis in the US market. Really low mileage cars seem to command a massive premium, which is what we'll look for here. We've then got the provenance, history, gearbox is a big thing. Manual gearbox and manual gearbox cars, especially in the US market, were I think undersold a little bit around the 2000s when the automatic and F1 gearboxes came in Ferrari, for example, or the e-gears in Lamborghini, PDK for Porsche. That meant that a bigger, much higher percentage of the makes and models sold in those years in the US were auto, whereas now lots of people want to get back to the analog driving experience with a manual gearbox. So again, there's that low supply, high demand aspect and characteristic that we look for. So the data takes in color as well, obviously manufacture year. Some of the key things we look for in specifications, types of stereo. It's got loads. If it's available on a listing and someone's mentioned it about their car, we've got the data point in the algorithm.
Okay, and you mentioned, and we've been talking throughout, as the U.S. being the target market here. How has exports to the U.S. changed in the last sort of 4, 5, 6 months, if at all? Anything you can say about that?
Yeah, I mean, so we were obviously very nervous about the biggest thing was the import tariff. That's the biggest thing that we were all looking at from a UK perspective or EU perspective. There's no doubt that the demand from the American market is getting stronger. However, if they were about to slap 20% import duty per state, then we would have, it would have been a very difficult market, and obviously would have made the trading of classic cars into America a lot harder. The fact that that wasn't applied at the point when all of the tariff indications and stuff was going on makes us believe it probably wouldn't be going to be something going forward either. It just isn't a big enough amount of money that they would, that the American government would stand to make, I don't think, from the import and export of classic cars. Whilst it's still a fairly big number, it's not the billions and trillions that they're making from the other tariffs that are being put on other types of goods and services. So, the other thing as well, which is a little bit, I guess, colloquial, but that there's a lot of campaign supporters of Donald Trump that have big car collections and that do a lot of global trade. So I think there's also incentivization from a personal network perspective, perhaps to keep that import duty at 2.5%. So that's the biggest thing. Obviously, currency fluctuation recently has meant that it's slightly different in terms of the US market as sort of weakened in terms of the dollar rates, but I think the demand is staying quite high, so it doesn't seem like the prices are falling. Provided the demand is still there, if the car costs an extra $50,000, $20,000, whatever it might be, because of the exchange rate, it seems like that's not meaning the prices are falling by that much. They're actually remaining strong because obviously there's such a scarce number of assets there. So really, in the FX world, we're kind of talking about whether we think the demand for the cars will drop. you know, people aren't willing to pay the price, even if the currency fluctuates, which we haven't really seemed to have seen over the last few months. So yeah, it's a very exciting opportunity, and yeah, quite a buoyant market by the look of it at the moment, even given the FX change.
Have you got any guesses or visibility of how many left-hand drive cars are imported to the US each year?
Oh, I think it'll be in the tens of thousands. Yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe even in the hundreds of thousands. I think the market, I mean, the global market for collectible cars is worth sort of 50 billion. So it's a big market, only second to art in terms of passion assets. And obviously the main movement of those will be between the EU and the US. I mean, we just recently at one auction, I think in Pebble Beach, the Sotheby's auction, you know, there was world records being broken for F50s and the 275 and a couple other cars, you know, so you know, most of those cars would have come from Europe and then be imported into the US, and they're selling for in the millions each one. So yeah, the market's, it's a big size.
So should the US become less attractive, what are sort of options, plan B, C, D, E, F?
Yeah, the main market we've been looking at and growing our presence in so far is the UAE. It's probably no surprise that the Gulf countries, the Gulf region, are starting to build quite a big appetite and desire for collectible cars. Also, I mean, you may know, but the majority of new stuff goes straight to Dubai now. So in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, they're actually now getting allocations of new things like Bugatti Veyrons or Chirons and the big Ferraris, etc. However, a lot of people are wanting to drive something a bit more classic in order to stand out, because everybody's got a Lamborghini SVJ. So the demand for things like Testarossa has actually grown quite a lot in the UAE, and the prices over there are still strong at sort of, you know, roughly between 400 and 500k for a very good car, whereas in the UK it's 200 to 250. So the arbitrage opportunity exists over there as well. The only thing I'd say is that the market is, you know, it's emerging rather than established. So, you know, it would be a good plan B for us if the cars weren't going to sell in the US for whatever reason, to take them to the UAE. But yeah, it's not as, I don't think this is already sort of pull demand as we see in the US, but definitely a good alternative market.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I'm sure we'll have a couple questions about that.
Mm-hmm.
Your background there is one of your 3 facilities, yeah, and you've got how many vehicles stored there? So
at the moment, I've just there's 115 assets under management in total across the car crowd. This is our what we call our supercar unit. So you can see the facility behind me. I always get this wrong when I turn the camera the wrong way. But you know, there's everything ranging in here from Jaguar E-types right up to the more modern stuff like you can see here, which is a Ferrari F8, which we store for a customer. So there's a mix here. We've got 42 of these assets or investment cars that we're holding for car crowd or car crowd partners. We have another probably 20 to 25 that are held for private portfolio clients, the family offices, etc., ultra high net worths. They're probably the ones that are under the covers because they're worth a bit more. And then the rest are private storage clients, where we offer storage for people who have either invested with us or are part of our member network. So yeah, the facility has been going. This one was newly built in 2020, so this is only 5 years old. They're all purpose built effectively, so dehumidified. We also have insurance value for £2 million for a single asset, up to £10 million for the total collection. And the security wise, it's a completely unmanned, unmarked. And if you'll be able to see this, I'll try and go outside, but if you can see, the sun's going to be very bright. Hopefully the camera will adjust, but
that's not England. It's sunny.
It's lovely, isn't it? So we have, this is our on-site security. Andrew lives here, does all the grounds, and is 24 hours a day with 2 dogs on site. And then we're literally in the middle of nowhere. So if I show you out here, you'll see this is it. You know, the facility has no main roads leading to it. It's completely unmarked. It's very, very quiet. There's literally no one ever around. All of our facilities as well, if I can just point up here, have, if you can see, security cameras behind my head. So they all have, we've got 11 in total external security cameras. Plus we have gated entry as well here, and gated entry at the top of the drive behind me up there as well. And there's about a 1 kilometer track to get down. So, you know, I mean, we don't do any advertising. Everybody who comes to the facility is ID verified before they're allowed in. And we keep it completely anonymous. So it's never marked or listed on social media, Google Maps, anything like that. And that's deliberately done. In fact, our home address, if you look us up, is in Newark Northgate, which is in the center of the town, about 8 miles away. And that's why just our registered address, just deliberately to make sure there's a distance between us and the cars.
Lovely. Have you ever had to make any sort of claims?
No, we haven't. Luckily, in touch wood, I'm trying to find some wood. You know, we offer pretty strict protocols. I mean, my background's in process engineering, so it's quite rigorous in terms of what we have to do on a daily basis in terms of checking the lifts. You know, we make sure they're all working. Every single car's on a trickle charger. All the trickle chargers are verified. That's linked to a fuse box, which is obviously, you know, rated, etc., so that there's minimal, no fire risk. We make sure all the cars are in good condition. We have a second unit, which is away from these cars, which is just for project cars. We actually work with a restorer who we store some cars for, but we make sure they don't mix, so that we've not got the risk of some of the older being restored cars that might not be, you know, quite so safe in line with these cars. We make sure there's definitely a mix between them as well. So I think sort of processes like that and extra caution has just meant we've never had to, you know, make any sort of claims for any damage or any accidents at all.
Okay, that's very lucky. One last question for me, then I'll open it up to the crew who's on the call here. What's something we talked about early on when we were having the conversations, but what's the realistic throughput per year before bottlenecks start to erode the arbitrage? Whether it's capital, sourcing capacity, shipping slots, vehicles available, you know, how much scale would become too much?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's a number of facets, I guess, to the answer. I mean, I think that the main strategy, or the best strategy, would be to try and up the amount per car in terms of the values, as opposed to upping the number of cars. So, you know, we've seen assets for $1 million, $2 million. Like I was saying, the record F50 sale was an EU source car that just sold for nearly $5 million, I think, in Pebble Beach. You know, the opportunity to make 20%, 30% on a £3 million car is very attractive and something that I think we could achieve. So I would suggest that, you know, both in the length of time and the amount of capital we could deploy, we could comfortably cope with up to 10 million on each cycle. And that would probably then be, you know, the similar number, so 2 to 4 assets that we'd be able to get. I think if we started to get to 6, maybe up to 10 assets, that's probably the maximum in each cycle with the current capacity. And that's, you know, from a position of being able to source them. But, you know, there is no reason why we couldn't take on extra operating cost effectively in order to be able to deploy more capital, because it just requires, you know, another analyst, potentially another sourcing expert. So, you know, there is the opportunity to scale in that sense as well. You know, if we're looking at going up the scale in asset values, the only thing I think we'd have from a risk perspective is finding the cars quick enough. You know, we're sourcing currently an EB110 Bugatti for a family office. We've seen 2, and that's taken us nearly 3 months to get to 2 that we've seen, and both of them are wrong. We've got a third car now that's the right car that the guy's now going into legal negotiations on, but it's part of a probate estate. So the negotiations and removing from the probate estate with the lawyers could take another 2 to 3 months. So there's just that slight risk as you go up the chain in terms of the availability and accessibility of the cars, but also that sometimes they are you know, harder to get the supply chain sorted. It's not like walking into a dealership and just writing a check and walking out with the car.
Yeah.
So that's the only risk I'd say. So I think, you know, we would look at a balance of potentially maybe changing some of the big cars if we're looking at £5 to £10 million assets, potentially doing, you know, 1 or 2 of those in a year, and then obviously, you know, populating the remaining 5 to 10 million of capital. We could still continue to do that kind of 6 monthly or 5 monthly cycles, and try to look between 3 to 5 assets. I'd say would be comfortable.
Okay, thanks, David. That's a good answer to a complicated question. Thank you.
Hopefully, sorry if I waffled.
No, it's great. Right, so we've got 5 or 6 folks who've joined us today. Who's got a question for David or me?
Hey, David, how you doing?
Hi, Drew.
Hey, thanks for your time and great answers. And I apologize if I think I have 2 questions, and if they're covered in the memo, I apologize. But the first is, have you done this short-term strategy before? It sounds like you had done a strategy of, you know, longer-term holds, but have you done this strategy before? And have you ever had one that just didn't work out? And what did you learn?
That's a great question. Yes, we have done it before. We're currently still doing it as well in terms of, you know, the hold for a single year, 12 months or maybe 18. That's what we'd sort of do as our shortest term hold. We've done it successfully with some smaller value cars like Honda Integra Type R DC2s, just coming 25 years old, like last year, 2 months ago. We did a buy to order for that car. We purchased it for sort of sub £10,000, sold it for like 16.5. So great return, 60%. Not great, huge numbers. Not going to make anyone mega rich, but a nice return there. From that, we then did a Lotus Omega that was ordered by a guy in the US that actually shipped it to his house in Mexico. But that was a similar kind of made to order strategy. So, we've only really done it on pull demand, as opposed to this, where we have some capital to deploy that we can go and, use the data science and arbitrage to go and get the right car that we think has the maximum opportunity to return. We've got a couple of TVRs that we're currently doing, TVR Tuscans, that are coming literally next year. They'll both be 25 years old and can start to be shipped. So we've purchased those, one in February and literally just one a couple of weeks ago. So those two cars will be held for like 6 to 9 months, and then they'll be shipped as well. So we do have experience with the short-term hold. In terms of something that's gone wrong, the only thing that's gone wrong is with shipping. We've learned some lessons with the shipping side of it and really having to trust the shipping supplier. The Lotus Omega, unfortunately, went over to the States, and actually the guy who imported it, because we were sort of managing the transport but didn't pick the transport company, he didn't really do his research. I don't think he had a sort of globally reputable company that were doing it. And actually there were parts stolen off the car in transit. So we had the rear bumper stolen, rear number plate housing weirdly, and then some engine parts. I don't quite know why, those individual bits, but when he got the car, the oil filter had been completely removed and there was oil all over the crate, and no sign of what had happened. So I think the lesson that we've learned and what we've done within the memo is put in a very reputable supplier called Ship My Car. You can go and look at them. They're a worldwide kind of global shipping firm, lots of experience. We know through one of our investors is actually also an investor in that company, so there's a very strong connection there with them. We've got trade rates that apply to people who do some in the region of 20 to 30 million of shipping a year, even though we're only going to be doing less than that, but we still get those rates, which is great. So that's probably the biggest lesson we've learned, I think, is making sure that we really have the protection from start to end in the transport cycle.
Does your insurance cover that sort of an issue that could crop up with shipping, or maybe the shipping company's insurance would cover that? In that case, did you just make the changes you needed to bring the car back to snuff and you were able to sell it?
Yeah, exactly that. So the guy wanted to use it, so we just helped him source from the UK the parts he needed and got them overnight. Well, overnight, probably a couple of days shipping. But yeah, so we helped him source that. He was obviously really disappointed, but realised it was kind of his own fault. He organised the shipping and everything, and included didn't get his own insurance, so he ended up paying for the parts. But we obviously helped as much as we could to kind of put it right for him. To answer your question, we'll be double insured for these cars technically, because our existing insurance policy that covers all these cars here does cover worldwide shipping and transport. So the cars will be covered for that, again, as a single asset up to a maximum value of 2 million. So if we do the bigger cars later on, we will increase that policy and increase that amount. And also the shipping company we work with, Ship My Car, will also have insurance on sort of accidental damage, etc., for the cars when they're loaded and unloaded as well.
Gotcha. That's a great answer. Thank you. My other question was really around like the deal terms, and I don't know if that's appropriate for this call or not. You tell me.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, just curious. Is David and the team there? Are they co-investing in the opportunity? I mean, I think I recall there was like a promote or an upside beyond a preferred return, but is David and the operators, are they putting their own dollars in on the same terms as the investors?
No, they're not co-investing. The way that we are working with David and the team we pay a 3% sourcing fee for all the work they've got to do to identify the vehicles, acquire them, get them ready to ship them, get them into the US. And then at the end of the year, we tally up the net gain basically between the sum of all the vehicles we've sold less the cost of all the vehicles we've sold, including all the import costs, their sourcing fees. So the actual true net, and their sort of success fee, if you will, is 10%, and that's before anything else that goes out to Altea Auto investors.
Okay.
But I just add on that, Joe, as well. I mean, we would. If we had all of our working capital has gone back into growing the business, so that our budget everything is set. So we don't invest, we don't take holds in our own cars at the moment either. We will be looking to join our own syndicates next year, because we would like to have a 10% stake in everything that we go after, because we do, you know, sweat the sourcing and put so much time and love into the cars that we actually, you know, would like to be part of the overall kind of consortium or syndicate. But at the moment, unfortunately, just where we are from the budget perspective with the business, it's just not possible for us to do so.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you. Good answers.
And that's pretty common with sort of all the partners we work with when we put together these opportunities. So our most successful opportunities, Altea, have been identifying a partner super deep in the field, knows their stuff, working with them to identify how to commercialize maybe a less obvious opportunity there, and then work with them on our operational side to make it happen. And we introduce it to our members. Like, I don't think any of our partners have so far put in their own cash, although Nico, our art broker, took some of his fees in equity. But yeah, it's pretty normal. These people are always, they're operational, right? They're not investors usually by trade. So it's really normal.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm sort of comparing it to, I'm a real estate developer, and sort of comparing it to what sponsors do in deals like this, and the operators. And sometimes people will like roll fees in, or a part of their fees in, to, you know, have a little skin in the game. So that's the basis of my question.
Yeah, it's very unusual in real estate for sponsors not to put equity in or their own cash in. Less of a thing in these kind of deals, though.
Yeah, makes sense.
Other questions? We've got Edward, Marcus still on the line. Cindy? If not, that's okay too. Okay, great. So I think
good.
I'm
good. What's the minimum?
10K.
Okay.
US.
Euro or USD?
US.
Okay. I missed the whole thing because I had a meeting prior. I just want to ask, like, just one question. Do we know what brand of the cars we're gonna have?
Yeah, I mean, not obviously looking more and more ahead, because obviously we're working on 6 monthly cycles. And Cindy, hi, great to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Obviously spoken quite a few times. We don't know the brands, like looking, you know, year 2, year 3. I think year 1, with the biggest arbitrage at the moment, seems to be air-cooled Porsches, special edition air-cooled Porsches, and also the Ferraris from kind of mid-90s, where there was a very low amount issued originally in the US. So 512Ms is the big one, 550 Maranellos, and then the big one for the Porsches is the 993 Carrera RS. We've just identified one actually from a partner of ours called Hexagon Classics that we can access. It's like kind of £335,000, but the US price is around $650,000. So the arbitrage straight for that first play is really strong. You know,
how is that even possible? How is that even possible? How is that even possible from 35,000 pounds to like 600K? Like
335,000 pounds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not quite as good as 35 to 600. No, 335 to 6 or 655, I think. We've seen a sort of equivalent cars for sale between the markets. Now, it's obviously not realized until we purchase that one and sell that one, but you know, it does indicate that in some of these more specialist cars, there can be very, very good opportunities across those brands. So yeah, Porsche and Ferrari, the main two to focus on, and then probably later on Lamborghini, potentially Aston Martin as well. You know, we do look across kind of 7 or 8 of the core brands. UK manufactured cars are usually quite good ones as well, because of the level of supply here and obviously the lower supply in the States.
Okay, good, because that's you said all the names that I want to try. I said it was last question, but after you said that, I have 2 follow-up questions. Sorry if I'm if you're repeating yourself. Number 1 is I didn't do the math, so net of all management fees and all the fees on top, what's the IRR per year? That's roughly range. That's number 1. Number 2 is, how can you make sure there's no gap in deploying the capital once you get something back? Like, how long does it take to find another one? Like the gap is usually very hard to manage. Like, how's it? I guess that ties in the deal flow. So just those 2 questions. That's it.
Yeah. Right. Do you want to go on the ARR and I'll go on?
Yeah, you go ahead and tackle the pipeline question while I'm digging up the
So
numbers.
on the pipeline side, and we sort of touched on it earlier. We are developing an algorithm, sort of effectively a proactive flagging algorithm that allows us to be able to identify changes in the number of cars that are available in each market, the prices of the cars in each market, comparing like for like. There's just kind of a constant monitoring system to help us keep the pipeline full. And then we'll be looking to take advantage of those things by sourcing the best asset here in the UK. Obviously, we do have a pretty extensive network now. We were saying our sourcing capability, should mean somewhere between 2 to kind of 5 to 6 weeks maximum. It should take us to source the target assets that we're looking at, including vetting them and purchasing. And then there's obviously shipping and sale, but we will, wherever possible, be already consulting the US market and our distribution partner out there to make sure that they know what car's coming. So it's not a case of ship it and then have to market it and wait. We should be actually, proactively getting on that almost as soon as we're sourcing the car and we know which one it is. We'll be looking to sell it straight in the US. So the aim is to try and do the cycle within kind of 3 to 4 months before we redeploy. Obviously, we put 6 months into the business case to make sure that we don't overpromise and underdeliver. But my hope is that we will exceed that cycle and be able to get through the capital, get through the cycles of capital, sort of 3 to 4 monthly rather than 6 monthly.
But you're not going to relax the criteria, right? I've seen so many of these cases before where they're so pressured to deploy the money, so in the end, like all the criteria just throw out of the window.
We won't ever reduce our criteria. I think we'll be very open and honest with you guys for that, but our reputation's on the line for that. That's why we've managed to complete over 42 successful projects in 4 years, because we do have a very strict curation criteria of only the best assets. And I think that's also where the best arbitrage comes from. If we're looking at low mileage examples in the US, they fetch very, very strong money even compared to here in the UK and Europe. So I think curation criteria and being strict is a lot more important than rushing through distribution of capital.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. Just quickly to the IRR questions, and you guys saw Edward, you had a question as well. So in the memo, we have base case as 6 months per rotation, 2 per year. Though David says plausibly 3 to 4 months is more realistic, but base case is 2 a year and about 19% ROI per rotation is the base case, which means after fees, IRR would be 28% for investors, right? If we had 2 years, 2 per year on base case. Obviously that increases if it's more than 2 rotations per year. Higher cases are possible, like David, you're talking about the 650 versus 350 vehicle we were just talking about. So those edge cases do exist, and obviously we're looking out for them, but we're not basing models on spotting those. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So if I understand correctly, we're like looking at 20 to 30% IRR baseline, net of fees.
Yeah, we've got 28 as base case, but plus minus.
That's net of fees and profit split, right? That's net.
Yeah, that's back in your pocket. Which leads into Edward's question, which is how will the returns be delivered to investors? Will profits stay in the account to make more purchases, or will they be distributed to investors? And if they are distributed, how frequently? So we're structuring this as an income fund. So every year, any profits after 365 days are returned, net of or less fees, and then whatever the initial capital investment is will churn again. So say we started out the $1 million US, IRR was 28%, so that's $280,000 US. We'll go back to you guys less fees, and then we'll start over again with $1 million. We did consider just compounding things like we've done with our Film 1 fund, but we are getting a lot of feedback from folks that liquidity and cash flow is more important at the minute than compounding.
Why would there be? Sorry, question for me. Would there be an opportunity for people to reinvest at the end of the 12 months if they said that I don't want to take my profit out, I want to continue and keep it in the fund? It's doing so well.
I think more likely to set up a second fund.
Oh, yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Fine.
So sorry, I swear it's the last question because I had a follow-up question. So if that's the case, so like if I test with a minimum first year and it works well, then the second year, do I have a chance to maybe increase, or like either like a cap or something like that.
Yeah, we could potentially do a tranche 2 the way we've done with film 1. So we could potentially increase the assets under management. It's actually a lot easier because we're not reinvesting profits. So yeah,
Yeah,
we could do that.
Yeah, I did a fund which we have to do DRIP, which is investment. Reinvestment, oh my God, it's a nightmare. It's absolute nightmare. So like we're never doing that again. We're just every year liquidity, cash out, cash in. If people want to add, just add, like much easier.
Yeah.
Works for us.
That's my last question. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. We'll probably look to call for commits by early next week. So that would be on or about July 8th for everyone watching at home.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Nice job. Thank you.